Hey, Dylan, I'm not seeing it yet.
Right. Yep. So if you try checking out the FWP YouTube page, it should be there. And I just tweeted it out.
There it
Now
is. I see
I'm
it.
in the process right now of embedding it on the IGBC website. YouTube's been having issues.
Hey, David.
Yes.
You know what we would do when we had in-person meetings is we would go around the room and ask everyone to introduce themselves. That may take time. Is that, I hadn't thought of that until now. You know, after calling the roll.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Dylan, is that technically feasible? Because then don't people have to unmute themselves?
Yep. So folks would have to unmute themselves, kind of like we did in the beginning. Or if you want, you could just kind of, David, you or Martha could just go down and introduce to the public. You know, we have Mike Philbin with BLM, Chris Savage with Forest Service, however you'd like to do it.
Oh, I'll do the roll call formally, Dylan, and have to do it that way again. I was thinking of the public, but you're right. I think I'll just say we normally do that, but in this instance, that's something that doesn't work on a virtual meeting because we can't see everyone. You know, how would you line everybody up? So I in second thought, I don't know that we can logistically do it. It just was nice always to acknowledge people and know who was, you know, participating.
We could switch it to gallery mode where for a moment or two it shows everybody's little square, so it kind of looks like the Brady Bunch intro type thing.
And that can be for the public participants as well, Dylan?
So anybody who calls in, they go into that. I don't know if you see if they're the attendees list. So the Zoom webinar feature only allows them to stay in that attendees list, and they aren't able to share their screen. They're only allowed to talk. Zoom only gives them the capability to provide audio.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, it would be nice. I don't know why Zoom doesn't let them turn on their camera if they have one.
Yeah.
I think like all of us, Zoom has even had to scramble to live up to the demand of everything online.
So good morning, folks. It is 10:15. My name is David Diamond. I'm with the Greater Yellowstone Coordinating Committee. I'm going to be the facilitator for this meeting today. This is the part 2 of the summer meeting of the Interagency Grizzly Bear Committee. And you've just heard us, if you've joined us on, hopefully you found this meeting on the Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks YouTube page. It's streaming there now and it'll be posted there later and on the IGBC website. And we've got a busy agenda this morning, and which will include hearing from members of the public who are joining us at a few points during the agenda, and we'll go over what the thought is behind that and how to do that in a minute. And I think you see on the slide here the phone number. That first opportunity is coming up in just a few minutes. So if you would like to comment, particularly on the law and policy updates related to the Ninth Circuit decision or the North Cascades decision, you might want to get into that queue now. But also keep your ear focused here, because I'm going to turn it over to Martha Williams, the Director of Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, to open the meeting.
Thank you, David, and good morning, everyone. I want to start off, it's always the way we start our meetings and thinking about who we are and what we do. And the Interagency Grizzly Bear Committee supports recovery, delisting, and ongoing conservation of grizzly bear populations and their habitats in areas of the Western United States through interagency coordination of policy, planning, management, research, and communication. So thanks for joining us at our summer meeting virtually in this unusual time of COVID-19. we would normally be having our meeting in the field. This meeting was going to be in the Bitterroot, but we were not able to do that. So this year, the summer meeting we did in 2 parts. A gathering online, we had our first part, and this is our second meeting. So the IGBC consists of senior leaders from federal agencies, the states, and Canadian provinces. And with that, I'd like to do a roll call and go through the agencies participating. So Idaho.
Yeah, Toby Boudreau from the Idaho Department of Fish and Game, and I currently am the Chief of Wildlife.
Great. Montana, Martha Williams, Director, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. Washington.
With the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, I'm the Diversity Division Manager.
Thanks, Hannah. We couldn't totally hear your name. That was Hannah Anderson. And Wyoming. We may have lost. We know that it's Tim Woolley, the State Wildlife and Habitat Management Chief, and he is on the phone. Were you able to unmute yet, Tim? He's present, but I know it's not easy to call in. So U.S. Forest Service, Region 1.
Yeah, Chris Savage with the Forest Service Northern Region in Missoula, Montana.
Thanks, Chris. Region 2.
Hey, good morning. Jackie Buchanan, Deputy Regional Forester from the Rocky Mountain Region in Denver.
And co-chair.
Oh, yes, and co-chair. Sorry, thanks, Martha.
Of the IGBC. Region 4.
Morning, this is Mary Farnsworth. I'm Deputy Regional Forester of the Intermountain Region. Good morning.
Great. And Region 6.
Hello, this is Eric Johnston. I'm Assistant Director for Natural Resources for Region 6, located in Portland. And can you hear me any better? I tried both video and audio earlier and it didn't work so well. It's working now? Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's nice and clear. Thanks, Eric. And then we have the National Park Service for the Intermountain Region.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Carpenter. I'm the Associate Regional Director for Resource Stewardship and Science for the Intermountain Region of the Park Service. Thank you.
Great. Pacific West.
Hi, good morning. Karen Taylor Goodrich, representing the National Park Service regions 8, 9, 10, 11, and 10 and 12. And that's shorthand for, or longhand for Pacific West region.
Great. Bureau of Land Management.
Good morning. I'm Mike Philbin. I'm the Deputy State Director for Resources and Planning for the Bureau of Land Management, Montana Dakota State Office in Billings, Montana.
Thanks, Mike. U.S. Geologic Service.
Yeah, that's Frank Vilmanen sitting in for Claudia Reagan with the Northern Rocky Mountain Science Center.
Hi, Frank. And I don't believe we have anyone from the Canadian provinces this morning. Anybody from Canada sign in since the morning? Okay.
And Martha, we have Tim Woolley back, so I'll unmute him real quick.
Great. Whoops.
Yeah, this is Tim Woolley. I supervise our bioservices branch, which was formerly our statewide wildlife and habitat section for the state of Wyoming.
Thanks, Tim. And then we have our IGBC subcommittee chairs. So for the Bitterroot ecosystem.
Yeah, good morning. This is Chuck Mark, the chairman for the Bitterroot Ecosystem Subcommittee and the forest supervisor for the Salmon Chalice National Forest in central Idaho.
Thanks, Chuck. And North Cascades, double duty.
Hi, this is Karen Taylor Goodrich representing North Cascades Ecosystem.
Thanks, Karen. Northern Continental Divide.
Yeah, good morning. This is Randy Arnold, Regional Supervisor with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and Chair of the Northern Continental Divide Ecosystem.
Thanks, Randy. As Selkirk Cabinet Yak.
Yeah, good morning. Rodney Smolden, Forest Supervisor on the Caldwell National Forest and Subcommittee Chair.
And then the Yellowstone Ecosystem.
Good morning, everybody. Tricia O'Connor here, Forest Supervisor on the Bridger-Teton National Forest and Chair of the Yellowstone Ecosystem Subcommittee here in unbelievably busy Jackson, Wyoming.
Thanks, Tricia. And then we have the IGBC advisors, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Morning, this is Hillary Cooley. I'm the Grizzly Bear Recovery Coordinator with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Forest Service.
Good morning, Scott Jackson here, U.S. Forest Service National Carnivore Program Lead based in Missoula, Montana.
Thanks. Information and Education Chair.
Hi, my name is Lori Roberts. I work for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and I'm the IEO Chair.
And last but not least, USGS.
Yep, Frank Vilmanen, team leader of the Interagency Grizzly Bear Study Team.
And actually, and we have one more. Do we still have you on the phone, Jody?
I am sorry. Good morning, everybody. Jody Bush. I'm the State Supervisor for Fish and Wildlife Service in Montana, and I supervise the Grizzly Bear Recovery Program.
Thanks, Jody. So with that roll call, I want to remind us all that this is a public meeting and that we welcome members of the public and certainly look forward to your input. We do miss having this meeting in person where we can go around the room and let you introduce yourselves and have a little more one-on-one engagement. But we do look forward to the times on the agenda where we get to hear from you. So periodically, when there are legal or personnel issues to discuss, the IGBC meets in executive session without the public present. And we held such an executive session this morning for the past hour. Our longtime executive coordinator retired in December, and we are making plans on how to fill this position. That's really important to supporting the work of the IGBC. So stay tuned for more details there. We also discussed some legal and policy updates, and we'll be briefing you on those in a few minutes. I want to really set the stage and recognize how much I value and respect my colleagues, fellow colleagues on this committee. I know we'll be hearing about some of the news of the day this morning, and while that's important, I really show up as the chair of IGBC for the substantive and long-term work of recovery and conservation, and work that I think we have all recognized that none of us can accomplish solely in our own jurisdictions. Last month, IGBC at our first installment of our summer meeting received reports on significant updates from the ecosystem subcommittees on reducing human bear conflicts and grizzly bear mortalities. And we also heard from the Information, Education, and Outreach Subcommittee on their efforts to reach key audiences to promote bear safety. And we gather today with the benefit of having time to have reviewed this terrific work by all of our agency staff and dedicated time on today's agenda to discuss it as executives. So our agenda today asks us to consider adopting consistent bear safe messages, to consider updating our grant-making criteria to include conflict prevention, and to engage with our subcommittees about their next steps on conflict prevention. Then also we will begin the discussion as IGBC executives on what additional initiatives we think collectively are important and require innovative cross-cutting efforts. So I'm proud of the direction this group is heading. I appreciate working with everyone and really look forward to rolling up my sleeves and getting to work with all of you today. So with that, David, I'll turn it back to you. Thanks.
Hey, David, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Recognizing this agenda today is got more space on it for discussion. Last month, there was quite a few substantive presentations accompanied by PowerPoint presentations. Today, we really just have three things. We have some updates from law and policy, and then we have two discussions, one on conflict reduction with the subcommittees, one on next steps with information, education, outreach. And those are going to be discussion with this group. We'll start with the law and policy updates, and we do have an opportunity for public comment after these. So we're going to hear from the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Park Service on the Ninth Circuit decision and the North Cascades decision. And after each of those presentations, we will take a short session of public comment so folks can weigh in on those. But the invitation today is we want to hear your input, but we also want to understand if you have thoughts about how this news should or should not affect the work of the IGBC going forward, and particularly the efforts that are on the agenda today related to conflict and prevention and related to information, education, and outreach. So with that, I will turn it over to Hillary Cooley from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the update on the Ninth Circuit.
Okay, thanks, David. I will be quick, but just wanted to give you a little background. We delisted the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem as a distinct population segment in 2017 because it had achieved recovery criteria. We were challenged in the Montana District Court, and the next year in 2018, the court ruled and vacated and remanded that rule back to the Fish and Wildlife Service. We decided to appeal to the Ninth Circuit along with the states as interveners and some other groups. And just a few weeks ago, July 8th, the panel, it's a panel of judges, they ruled. And they ruled on three main things. And in general, they upheld the Montana District Court for the most part with one exception. So the first issue that they discussed was the effect of delisting the GYE on the remnant of the grizzly bear population. We carved it out of the lower 48 state listing. They disagreed with the Montana District Court on that ruling in the point that they do not believe the service needs to do a full 5-factor review on the entire lower 48 state. If you're not delisting the entire thing, they said you don't need to do a comprehensive review of it. But they also stated that if you're going to delist a distinct population segment in that way, you need to ensure that what's left behind is a valid listable entity. They were a little bit fuzzy on the details there, but that's it in a nutshell. The second issue is genetic health and connectivity. They upheld the Montana District opinion on that as well. They specifically said that their opinion was based on the fact that we had a lack of regulatory mechanisms in place that ensured long-term genetic health. And the third issue was recalibration. The court found that a commitment to recalibrate is required if we are talking about, and we did, potentially coming up with a different population estimator in the future. So they kept it to those three issues. The service is internally looking at that. It's pretty complicated. In the meantime, we are continuing to work on our 5-year review. We're making good progress. We plan on having a final 5-year review ready and published in March of 2021. And that's all I have, David.
Okay, Hillary, any questions for Hillary from the IGBC members? Okay, so then Dylan, I'm going to ask you if we've got folks ready or have a thought. And again, there's multiple opportunities to comment today. There's this portion here in the morning, and then also at the end of the meeting after the main discussions. But again, we're looking for your views on this as it relates to the work of IGBC going forward.
So David, we have 4 call-in numbers, it looks like. So if you would like to comment on this issue, if you could please press *9, that will raise your hand and show that you're interested in comment on this specific topic. So I'll pause a moment and see if anybody else out there wants to call in, or if any of these phone numbers who have called in right now, if you would like to comment, please press *9.
And we will ask, there's only a short period for this particular topic. So just keep your comments brief and concise, and we really look forward to the input.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands being raised, which tells me no one wants to comment on this particular topic. I'll pause it's just a little bit longer. *9 if you would like to comment on this topic. All right, going once, going twice. I guess, David, we can move on to the next one.
Okay, and again, this is not the last chance. We're going to open it again in a minute here after the North Cascades brief, and then we'll also be opening it around 12:30. That depends on discussion. We've got a more fluid agenda today, but basically at the end of the meeting, there's another opportunity that's more extended for comments. So with that, Karen Taylor Goodrich from the National Park Service will give a report from the North Cascades.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. Good morning, everyone. Again, Karen Taylor Goodrich, National Park Service, representing the North Cascades ecosystem. And by way of an update on the ecosystem, you might recall, and this is for our members of the public, that we were in the middle of a environmental impact statement restoration planning process for grizzlies for the North Cascades about past 5 years. On July 7th, Secretary of the Interior, David Bernhardt, announced a decision. There was a press release that went out to terminate the environmental impact statement process. So at this point, all work towards moving forward on that environmental impact statement by the National Park Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who are the co-leads in this environmental impact statement, along with our cooperating partners of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Forest Service. So now we have been terminated. There's, as you can imagine, a high level of media interest. We've also had a notice of intent filed by the Center for Biological Diversity against the Department of the Interior and the 2 lead agencies, National Park Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We've also have a number of requests for additional information from the Center for Biological Diversity for the agencies in the department that we're working through. That's the update, Dave.
Okay, similar invitation then to members of the public for a public comment here. So Dylan, I'll ask you if we've got folks in the queue.
We do have someone who just raised their hand. And again, a reminder for others, if you'd like to comment, please press *9 to raise your hand. Others who are out there watching, please call in so that you can be waiting in this queue, because there is about a 5-second lag for YouTube. So if you want to be making sure you're on the right topic, please call in and hang out in that queue for this opportunity. So I'm going to start with phone number ending in 828. I'm going to unmute you. Please state your name and where you're from.
Hello, everyone. My name is Graham Taylor, and I'm the program manager for the National Parks Conservation Association in the Northwest office based in Seattle. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Great. NPCA was pretty disappointed to hear this news about the North Cascades. We have seen the Park Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service really do an incredible job with this process to determine how to best recover the grizzly bear in the North Cascades, one of the very few places recovery is viable. It will remain viable. The habitat will remain as you know, and into the future. And NPCA is going to remain committed to recovering grizzly bears in the North Cascades despite this decision. It was a very confusing decision for NPCA, especially since Secretary Zinke had visited the region calling for grizzly bear recovery previously. So the administration seems to have changed its mind. However, we think that there's still opportunity to recover grizzly bears there, and we're going to be exploring all the different options to pursue that opportunity. We have seen the public comment results from the initial FOIA request for the initial public comment, because there was kind of two sections of public comment. We have seen the overwhelming public support for grizzly recovery in the North Cascades. It's really, it was overwhelming. It was incredible to see that from our FOIA. So we know that the public who's interested in this issue are massively supportive, and we're really planning on tapping into that support to continue to pursue this, especially since the administration really has just abandoned this project rather than made a final decision. So that's, I guess, my comment, but really just appreciate everyone who's working on this issue. And I hope that, the North Cascades remains a part of the conversation because, there are ongoing projects to really figure out how many bears are left. We can't really say how many bears are left. So we hope that the region in the park continues to be managed for grizzly bears as it is now. And we hope to support y'all in the work that you're doing and, continue the fight. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. All right, any others in the queue who would like to comment? Please press *9 to raise your hand. Any others or others out there who'd like to call in? I'll kind of pause a moment to have you call in on the phone number that's listed on the IGBC website or on the FWP YouTube page.
Yeah, and while you're waiting there, Dylan, I mean, if folks missed that first round, it could be on either of these topics for right now. And again, there will be an opportunity later in the agenda for more extended comment.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I think we can move on to the next one.
Okay, well, the next thing would have been any further discussion amongst this group. Again, with the same question: how did this decision on Cascades and the decision in the Ninth Circuit affect or not affect what you're doing and going to be speaking about here in a few minutes? Or any further observations or discussion here amongst this executive group?
I'll chime in, David. I feel like both the decision and both decisions just demonstrate the state of flux or the uncertainty, legal uncertainty, political uncertainty that we are in, and just reminds me of or tells me I think we're on the right track and really focusing on conflict prevention, reduction, and information education and outreach, that that the IGBC is really still focused on that substantive work of continuing to recover, conserve bears and figure out what it means for the people who live with them in the landscapes where they reside. So I feel like the uncertain times that we are in legally and politically just keep us on track for the work we're doing as a committee. But I wonder, how do others feel about that? Jackie.
Yeah, I figured out, thanks to Toby, how to raise my hand. I'm right with you. I think we have to remind ourselves there has been a lot of good work done, and we can't forget that. And we can't be derailed from going forward. And we may have to refocus a little bit, may have to add a few things in, but good progress has been made. We are on the right track, and so we just have to keep looking forward. Take those lessons with us and keep focused, because we have done really good things, and folks are, as Hillary talked through it, we've gained, we've learned a lot. We are continuing to learn more and more about these bears and what we do need to have in place to have a population that will be viable, because that's what we want. And so let's just keep the focus going, and I think we'll get there. So can't lose track, can't lose hope.
Thanks, Jackie.
Martha, hi, this is Karen again. From an ecosystem perspective this time, I think we still have a lot of good work to do at the ecosystem level, and keeping our motivations up and the momentum forward. Doesn't matter if we have this pause or whatever it might be. There's also a lot of really great work being done in British Columbia, just to our north, and strong support in the province up there, between the First Nations and the provincial government for restoration of grizzly bears. And so, we can do everything we can in our US portion of the North Cascades, and to support that level of work up there as well. It's complementary to what we're trying to do. And of course, as the National Park Service, we are, just by mandate of our Organic Act, but also because of the wilderness overlay for most of that area, we will manage for grizzly habitat. So I think we'll keep moving forward.
Thanks, Karen. For how many years have you worked on this?
We kicked it off in about 2015, so about 5 years. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
And David, before we move on, I don't know if we have somebody who raised their hand in the comment portal.
Sure, that's the intent here, is to get some input to this group.
Very good. So phone number starting in 206 and ending in 401. I'm going to unmute you. Please state your name and where you're from.
Hello and good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Excellent. This is Rob Crable calling. I'm a Northwest representative with Defenders of Wildlife, calling from my home in beautiful South Tacoma. And I would like to just provide some comments on the North Cascades Grizzly EIS. I'd like to start off by expressing my appreciation for all the hard work that staff with the National Park Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service locally spent on developing the EIS and doing outreach to the folks who live in and around the ecosystem. Defenders is extremely disappointed that the Department of Interior leadership decided to terminate the EIS. This move was an insult to the countless hours and resources invested in the development of the EIS, the community outreach, and scientific research done by staff. Secretary Bernhardt decided to ignore the best available science and public opinions at the behest of a handful of vocal opponents who live on the eastern fringes of the ecosystem. If Secretary Bernhardt had actually traveled throughout the ecosystem instead of just listening to Congressman Newhouse, he would have heard overwhelming support for grizzly bear recovery. I am proud to say that Defenders of Wildlife works hand in hand with many of these communities, from hikers in Seattle to the Sauk Seattle tribe to rural waste haulers in the Methow Valley. We've been proactively engaging people, listening to their concerns, and partnering with them to find solutions that allow them to live alongside bears respectfully. It is beyond disappointing that the Secretary didn't even bother to meet with the countless Washingtonians who support grizzly bear recovery. As a reminder, a poll that was conducted a few years ago found that over 80% of Washingtonians, including the vast majorities of Republicans, Democrats, and independents, support grizzly bear recovery guided by agencies and scientists. According to these scientists, augmentation is the only viable path to achieve grizzly recovery in the North Cascades. We know that the facts and the public are on the side of grizzly recovery, and Defenders is committed to deepening our work in the North Cascades so that communities feel empowered and prepared to share the landscape with grizzly bears. Again, I want to express all of my appreciation to the folks locally with the agencies who have done such good and hard work on this. Defenders does not view the actions by the Secretary as the final word on grizzly bears in the North Cascades. And as many of our allies have stated both today and earlier, we plan to continue finding ways to support grizzly bear recovery and support the people living within the North Cascades ecosystem. And I really hope that we will be able to work with the agencies and with the department moving forward to actually achieve the vision of grizzly bear recovery in the North Cascades. So that's all that I wanted to say today. I appreciate all the work that y'all have done and appreciate the opportunity for providing public comments this morning.
Thank you for the comment. I'll pause a moment to see if there's any others out there who would like to comment. Please press *9 if you would like to comment on this topic. Seeing none, David, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, and so I will ask the IGBC members once again, any further reflections or thoughts for these topics? And if not, my view in virtual meetings is more breaks is better than fewer breaks. And so my suggestion would be to use this last 10 minutes to take an extra break and take up the conflict reduction topic at 11 a.m. as planned. I'm getting some thumbs up on that.
Good.
Okay, well, thanks for members of the public who were able to provide input. Again, at the end of this meeting, we'll have another opportunity over the whole agenda subjects and looking ahead to our winter discussion. And we will stand then in recess until 11 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Pacific. Okay, folks, welcome back to this IGBC meeting part 2. So we have two sections here of the agenda remaining, two 40-minute time blocks for the committee to discuss substantive work that was presented at the part 1 of this meeting in June. And so on the agenda, which is posted on the website, and then also here on the screen right now, are sort of the discussion questions and the hoped for outcomes in this discussion. And I'll leave that up while I do this introduction, but then I'm gonna take it down while we work through it. But just as a quick recap, last March of 2019, Matt Hogan, who was the chair of the IGBC at the time, sent a letter to each of the subcommittees asking them for recommendations to reduce conflict and prevent conflict. And at the December meeting in 2019, the subcommittees presented their work on that. And then the letter had anticipated this summer trying to put that together into sort of an action plan. And at the June meeting, you got an update on what the substance of those subcommittee work was, and also some observations about overlaps and connections both across the subcommittees and in the subject area of information education outreach, because quite a bit of preventing conflict is in that communication. So I have handy, if we need to refer to it, the slides that Hillary Cooley from Fish and Wildlife Service and the advisor to the IGBC presented last time on conflict. We have the questions that we can keep up for this discussion, but really this is your time as executives to react to that work and think about, starting with the end in mind. At the winter meeting of IGBC is when the IGBC updates its work plan. And so turning these plans that have been worked up by the subcommittees into IGBC work plan items that then get tracked is sort of a longer term goal for this discussion. So who would like to start here with these questions? And maybe, I don't know if it makes sense to start with subcommittees who have done the work, or executives who have looked it over since the June call.
And David, just for clarification, I also see on the agenda conflict recap by Hillary. Are you thinking of that later?
Well, no, that's available. We have those slides that we can go back through just to recall, and the agenda sort of at a very high level hits what the subjects that are being taken on by the subcommittees. So you have those there, and we have our subcommittee chairs here participating who can give you a little more detail on those. And then, yeah, if you would like, we can go back through that overview that Hillary did in June, if that's helpful.
I think it's helpful to do that briefly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to maybe just orally go through. I don't need to click through my slides, David, but your little chart on the agenda. So what I did, the subcommittees, really there were 3 of them, because the Selkirk and Cabinet Yaak are together as one. And then the GYE, or the YES subcommittee and NCDE all produced a report. I was involved in the NCDE one. We looked at the reports. There was a group, we got people from each of those subcommittees who were involved in the reports. We had a little short meeting or phone call. And then for the last meeting, I compiled all their main recommendations. And that's what's shown in this chart. Everybody took a little different tact because everybody was working on this separately. The Yellowstone subcommittee had been working, they really had a huge jump start. I'll just say, let's put it that way. In 2009, they produced a report basically on this same topic. And the subcommittee had asked them to do that work. And so they had a really substantial report to start from. So they went back to that report and reviewed progress to date and modernized it a little bit. And also had a workshop, a public workshop, to help prioritize things. And so you can see their 5 top areas of conflict that they want to, in the future, somehow address. What they did as well is they identified 2 of those. You can see them: efficacy of IEO and then outreach to communities and expansion areas. They actually went ahead and identified those as ones that they would like the full executive committee to work on, with the idea that they would, as a subcommittee, work on the other 3 themselves. And it would be good maybe to hear from Trish or something. Some of those are unique to Yellowstone, or they have some unique component, and that's why I believe that's the thought behind that. NCDE, we did a little bit differently. We started with all the mortalities and categorized those and prioritized the ones where we thought we could have the most impact, or saw, significant trends that we think we could do something about. Several of these, for instance, the shooting related mortalities, that is IEO heavy. And there are places in here, especially shooting related, I think that's common among all ecosystems, that it's an IEO component, and work on that could benefit all of the subcommittees. And so some of the things we've been talking about are, how do we loop in the IEO subcommittee? I think Lori has you'll hear from Lori shortly. They have already been thinking about messaging and these things might really dovetail well together. The railroad and vehicle collisions are fairly specific to NCDE, but we do have ongoing issues in other ecosystems too. And then the site-related conflict, that is definitely common among all ecosystems, but there is an IEO component, educating people on waste management and how to protect your chickens. It's a big one here in the NCDE. But there's also an on-the-ground component that needs to be addressed locally in terms of getting people supplies. And one thing the subcommittee was discussing was investigating enforcement, local ordinances, or how do you get compliance? And so, and then the Cabinet YAC, they took a similar tack. So those were the higher causes of human-caused mortality in there. Some are IEO and some are more specific to that area. So I think it would be, to me, the big question is, how do we ask the subcommittees, what do you want to do individually, subcommittee, versus what do we think IGBC could do? Is that just IEO, or is there another way to have a cross ecosystem working group to address these topics?
Thanks, Hillary. That's helpful background. And Lori, you will weigh in on the next agenda item, or did you have thoughts on teeing this up as well?
Yeah, no, I will definitely weigh in on the next agenda item. And I guess I welcome the committee to help us with our work plan for IEO, if there's anything from that list, and I'll kind of filter if we feel like we can take it on or not.
Rodney.
Thank you. I will add, it was the hope of the Selkirk Cabinet YAC to get time with the NCDE together as 2 subcommittees and have conversation around those common threads to see how we could work together on those so that we're not duplicating effort, and get some alignment around items that may be better suited for IEO. I don't know if Randy has anything to add to that. Unfortunately, the timing of our meeting was right when the COVID hit and shut us down. And what we probably need to do moving forward is have a conversation around the reality that it may need to be virtual and keep moving forward.
Are you still on, Randy?
I am. Thanks, Martha. So I think first, just to respond to Rodney's point, yeah, I think it's worthwhile for us to continue trying to figure out how to meet. There's efficiency or economy of scale in common messaging, and also looking for some of the consistency in the messaging. And I think the information education outreach is really going to be helpful to see that. I'm still struggling. I'm not trying to make any big, strong stance here, but I struggle as the NCDE continues to look at our priorities that we identified, the shooting related, automobile, rail, and then the site related conflicts. The bread and butter of a lot of our work is that site related conflict and the waste management and the chickens and the conflict reduction programs around livestock. That's really where a huge portion of our energy goes. And I'm still looking at the way that the different ecosystems, the benefit of cross ecosystem comparisons of these common things. But I think the benefit that we haven't really tapped is the intra ecosystem. And so I think that's still for me a bit of a question on the role of IGBC and helping the subcommittees, not only in what we're doing consistently in all of our own little spots, but how do we find those consistencies and apply them between the ecosystems? And I think that that's not inconsistent with some of the previous conversation around IGBC responsibilities. So again, not trying to make any big point, just that I'm still encouraged by our continued conversation to coordinate these and looking for ways that we replicate them outside the ecosystems to benefit those bears that are moving in the lands in between.
Go ahead, Tricia O'Connor, Yellowstone ecosystem.
Yeah, I think kind of similar to what you're hearing, I think, from the other two chairs, and it really reflects why our subcommittee recommended those two topics, as Hillary mentioned, around information and education and work out for, expanding populations between ecosystems to fall to a different level because, well, a couple of reasons. And one, I think, is just our own horsepower and expertise. We feel like we don't, we have to focus on where we locally, I guess, within our ecosystem can really make a difference. And I feel like we've done that. And so I think those other two places just are ripe for some cross ecosystem work. I'm not sure what that looks like yet, though. And I think that, and the reason I say that is I really believe that at the ecosystem level, you have the practitioners who really are the experts that could help with those. And they only have so much time and energy. And so I think there's the structure of how that might work is something we'd have to think about. But I think those, I still believe, as does our committee, that those topics are ripe there. And just a little FYI on what we've been doing as a subcommittee to further this dialogue is you've seen our draft report. We have a tech team that has actually refined that now, and really, again, we're trying to get to actions, and we're trying to get to actionable items that we can make progress on. And they've even started narrowing it down to where they believe the highest priorities are. And so it's really coming down to a handful of topics that we as a subcommittee feel like we're going to work on. And the other thing I would mention is, I think, at least I know we will, a little bit of that lens of, if we produce something, really thinking about how it might intersect with other ecosystems, and starting to think about producing things, if it's information or if it's techniques that are shareable and replicatable. I think, again, that's a role of IGBC somehow in this, even though I also believe subcommittees and our local in our local areas have really good ideas, as do our partners, and we got to tap into that too.
So is the question, partly then, Trisha, that you just posed is how does the IG, and Hillary too, how does the IGBC best, what is its role? How does it best help those cross-cutting issues that the subcommittees are dealing with? And as Randy, you pointed out, maybe also how does IGBC help with the places in between? And David, I'm so proud of myself. I finally found it. I'm holding up a book called The Places in Between. Everyone's tired of me talking about it, so I finally found it. But anyway, are those the two questions really here of with all the great work the subcommittees are doing? What are the threads that the IGBC collectively can help with? Are those the questions you're posing?
Martha, I think yes, pretty much. You know, some other things in my mind. Well, I keep thinking of Toby. I see him there in the corner of my screen, and this is, you know, his thought about maybe IGBC. We need to think about restructuring it a little bit. Maybe this doesn't rise to that, but this cross-cutting ecosystem is a new way of doing it, and the bears are telling us we kind of have to start thinking that way. So. Yeah, I can see us setting up another working group for this. You know, we might get start to have working group fatigue, but I think that's what needs to happen. And maybe it's as simple as 1 or 2 people from each subcommittee who were working on the report to start thinking about that. The other question in my mind is involving outside groups, or whether it's, I think Yellowstone, I think Trish, you're involving WYOGA, right? Wyoming Guides and Outfitters. The NCDE suggested looking into that, whether it's something like that, the industry, or, you know, the big one in my mind is there are an awful lot of people who have expertise in bears, in IEO, in prevention. And can we, or how do we, does the executive committee want us to some way think about tapping into that? Because the site conflicts and the waste management, it's resource heavy. I mean, we know what to do. It's just people, you know, equipment, and that all takes money, and which is limited. So I would really like to see if IGBC is interested in starting to think about that.
In a way, Hillary, it's a way to try on Toby's ideas of if there may be committee fatigue, but it's a way to kind of bridge and see, does that work? Is that starting to address what we need before really switching gears? Toby, what do you think about that?
I think it actually fits in quite nicely. I think I understand small working group fatigue, but I also understand that we need to move this ball down the field. And I think if a small group can get together and talk about this, and, you know, it really sort of fits into the bigger discussion about how ecosystems, you know, are preventing the idea of doing duplication errors and really putting the most resources to the most important things to help bears recover and get them delisted. So I'm all in favor of it.
So I guess as a facilitator, the question then would be is there something specific that you see amongst this list that lends itself to that? Or playing devil's advocate, is it okay that Yellowstone is focused on backcountry recreation and hunting and is doing some work with Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association, and maybe we'll be producing a product fairly soon that might have application in other places. And meanwhile, NCDE is focusing on collisions and other topics. In other words, is that the old, the states are the laboratories of democracy idea that you've got different groups that are doing things that may then be of use more broadly. So just, it's sort of, it doesn't have to be an either or, it might be a both and, but just putting that out there.
Thanks, David. And I didn't mean at all to suggest an either or. I was thinking a both and. That it sounds like the individual subcommittees, there's some real beauty, like you say, in the certain topics they're taking on. And at the same time, there's some cross-cutting topics that could probably benefit from then a working group that's also cross-cutting. So I'm hearing it as both. Randy.
Yeah, I just want to affirm that, Martha, that I think that is the case, and not to take it to the ridiculous, but in the months it's taken us to put this together, we're still doing our work. We're still responding to conflicts. We're still doing education outreach. And so, yeah, we're going to keep on keeping on. We're going to keep doing our best to manage where we can in those conflicts that we have at us. And so we'll be focusing there. The real energy here is taking what we've learned. And David, you identified two really important things, examples of things we've learned, efforts locally that appear to have really good traction, and replicate those, and don't reinvent that wheel, but use instead that wheel to figure out where do we take that in the next place. The other benefit that Hillary pointed to is and a lesson that we learned a little bit from the transportation summit in Montana was just the benefit from pulling in outside partners and organizations on those groups, because it then becomes less this federal and state agency management and partners trying to move the dial and bringing in those conversations later. Instead, we're moving together, lockstep right out of the gate, trying to figure out how do we do this together, which then brings not only support for the projects and the work, but also the resources. So I just acknowledging, I think that replicating those issues that as we learn them from the subcommittees or from the ecosystems, and figuring out a way that they then get support in other places. Maybe it's at like a work group level or subcommittees around those things. Again, I stall out trying to figure out the exact mechanism and the shape of it.
So I will bring up, just kind of on the hunting topic, after our first meeting in June, I was approached by an outdoor media program out of Bozeman, or group out of Bozeman, and they put together a hunting guide for the greater Yellowstone area called Stalk. And it's a brochure and it's online. And they asked us, in that brochure, they have different sections, and one is safety with hunting. But nowhere in the brochure do they talk about grizzly bears or bear spray or anything. So they asked if we felt like it would be good to take out an ad. And so we did. We took out a full page ad. We used WMI money because we do have some extra money for IEO. And we put together, and we took the messages straight out of the message guide that we'll talk about later on for hunters, to talk about bear spray and about what to do when you have an animal on the ground. And the other cool thing about this brochure is it has an online component, and we could put the YouTube ad of Craig Bonington showing how to use bear spray on that part. And so we went ahead and did this. We got the approval from all the IEO chairs and then also the advisors. And what we thought of was, this will help. It goes out to the greater Yellowstone area, but then those people might not just hunt there, they might hunt other places. But two, it kind of brought up, should the IEO group start looking into a communication plan? And maybe that's where we can help with this topic of how do we message this, where do we message this, and how much would that cost?
And Hillary, you were going to say something again, I think. Still pertinent?
Well, Lori kind of did it. I guess I just wanted to remind, we were talking about cross subcommittee work. And I guess I just wanted to remind everybody, that's what the IEO subcommittee is doing. All of their work is cross ecosystem, and you'll hear from Lori all this stuff. So we can probably already check some of these things off the list, just given the messaging that those guys have come up with, and you'll see that. But I just wanted to remind people that's going on. So we kind of have a model if we wanted to do that for other topics.
I wonder, David, I don't know whether this is the way it was set up to go, but I'm wondering whether I'm trying to get my head around what we're talking about and what this work group would focus on specifically, because it sounds like there are a number of issues. And I love the idea, Randy, of a work group that pulls in different ecosystems, all of the ecosystems, and perhaps some outside partners. But are we talking about something like a places in between work group? Or are we talking, because there's the IEO subcommittee, or I guess I'm trying to understand, what are we really talking about, and what would this work group focus on that would add value in addition to IEO and in addition to the subcommittees? I'm trying to understand the question.
Yeah, that's a good question, Martha. I think to me, it's everywhere bears are. And the one topic, I'm assuming IEO is already taken care of. The one topic that sticks out to me is a site-related conflict. Sure, we've got highway issues and railroad issues, but each one of those are very specific to that section of highway. And it's not that outside or other ecosystems couldn't benefit from, say, work that the NCDE is doing, but the site conflict is, like I said before, it's resource heavy. And so one of the big questions is, how do we get the resources to do this? And we don't have it even in the occupied ecosystems, never mind the expansion areas. There's so much work we need to do with making sure everybody has a bear can and electric fence to put around their hobby farms. And you can go down the list, but it's just a matter of funding and getting the message out and getting somebody on the ground to do it.
And Randy, does that address, is that what you were thinking as well?
Yeah, it gets at it for sure. And I think Hillary did a nice job of separating out those things. And again, I'm looking through an NCDE lens right now, but the automobile and rail, we've made a lot of efforts at bringing in Department of Transportation and working with the rail companies, and we're making some strides in addressing that stuff. They're on different tracks. They have different horizons and timelines, but the site-related conflicts, there's a lot of stuff that's common there, but it's not a small topic. It's different whether you're livestock producers, it's different whether you're subdivisions, if you're a community that has problems with black and grizzly bears in town due to sanitation issues. But what is similar is all of those different elements, whether it's livestock or sanitation, and that is our bear specialists or conflict specialists every day is filtering through what are they bumping into. And like Hillary looked to, and David, I'm going to rob your term again. When you look at the NCDE and that enterprise, it's big. NCDE took 20 plus years to develop the resources we have there. That machine's running. It could always use more resources. But where we're short is taking that entire engine and moving it 1 inch further and to the next donut and the other ecosystems that don't have those resources yet. And that is a frontier it's big, and it's where most of our efforts will be next. So and it not only supports those I previously identified ecosystems, but all of the land in between. So Hillary, when you said it's where the bears are, yeah, and where they're going. And therefore, I think it is an effort to look at, so how do we work around these site-related conflicts? It's such a big topic, but there are so many common things in there, and then bring partners in and start looking at where are shortfalls for resources and the rest. Again, I have to be careful. I'm just seeing it through my lens, and I know the Yellowstone ecosystems and others have done such great work in areas that are really high priority for you. So I've got to be careful that this doesn't drive the conversation.
Trisha, looks like you're ready to jump
well,
in.
I think, yeah, I am, because I think that the way this conversation is going, I would also come back to one of our priorities was around the sort of community engagement, which really intersects exactly with this topic. It really was focused on the communities that don't currently or are just starting to get grizzly bears, and how are we dealing with that? And so what I'm wondering right now is, kind of thinking about this, is site conflicts, I guess I would pose the question, is that the best place for us collectively to focus energy? And it kind of like it's within the ecosystems, but it's also outside of ecosystems. And I kind of come back to what Hillary says. We know what we need to do, but it takes people, infrastructure, and and again, additional resources. But I sort of wonder if we had a collective effort on that, would we fare better than each ecosystem approach? And then you still have that vast landscape between ecosystems that we go, well, is that Yellowstone's or is it the Bitterroots? Whose town is that, right? Because it's none of ours. It's not within our confines. So I'm kind of wondering about that as I like that idea of perhaps, I don't know if the working group it is, but where you pull people from all the different ecosystems to sort of think about collectively what might this look like. And then to me, it gets into then what partners are there out there that are willing to help? Because certainly within the Yellowstone ecosystems, we've had a partner that's been really willing to help us with infrastructure in campgrounds, for example, with bear boxes. And so are there other partners out there that would really, and I will just say, I think sometimes when it's a widget, so to speak, of a structure, people can fundraise around that. So it's just, I think there could be some energy around that, and that would make it a little more focused than something that's broader around, well, what do we do in these places in between, which really opens it up to a little maybe less concrete actions.
So to clarify, Trisha, I get it. You were saying, rather than the broad topic of the places in between, which I think you're not just right. You were talking about site-related conflict, or asking where would our energy be most helpful? Where should we focus our energy? And while at one point you were thinking potentially community engagement, you're now shifting more toward the concept of site-related conflict. Did I hear that?
Well, I guess yes. And what I would say is, I think there's also an intersection with, it's not just, site-related conflict to me is inherently part of the community engagement piece. And it's both, there's an education piece and getting people to understand how to live with bears. And then there's the infrastructure you need so people can live with bears in their communities and in their hobby farms and wherever at their houses. So I guess to me, it's those couple of things intersect. And my question is that the place for IGBC to engage in and pull together the work that's going on within the ecosystems that can translate in those places in between?
Cool. And it's so great, just to be talking about this at this scale. And Tricia, when you were talking about, where do we put our energy in those resources? I fully agree. And I think about even at that broader scale. So where do you put the next bear-proof container? Or where do you engage the next community? And I kind of flipped the conversation all the way back to, well, what if we did nothing? What if we did nothing new? What if we did nothing proactive? We would find out very quickly where we should have been and where we should be tomorrow, where we should be today. And I think our effort and the impetus for us to move a little more together on this would be, let's try not to be chasing this and instead just get one day ahead. And if this group were to coordinate and communicate across, so here are the places that we have these challenges, these are where we've really seen success and where we've been living around these issues for 20 years. Here's the enterprise that was built to support that kind of conflict that you see. And then be ready to have resources and conversations and then right size that for the situation. So it might very well be a community that doesn't really have any bears in that community, and it's an education outreach. It's a, hey, you may be seeing this, you may start bumping into bears in the places that you used to go. But in those communities that are significantly running into issues, it's being really proactive with sanitation. It's being really proactive with starting to reduce the potential for those conflicts. But I think that kind of coordination would be really helpful just to get out of, for me anyway, this machine of and some fairly tight blinders on here's what the NCDE is responsible for. I'd just like to bump it up just a little higher.
I'm curious, Rodney, what you think from Selkirk, Cabinet Yaak. And I also am curious from other states too.
What I think in regards to the conversation so far.
Yeah, I'm wondering the concept that Tricia and Randy were floating of somehow pulling together a work group from each of the ecosystems and focusing largely on community engagement, which includes conflict.
Right, because as we go east to west, the population is similar. It slowly declines, right? I mean, there's a geographic connection here. So I think anything we do as a committee, whether it's an issue at our subcommittee level or not, is going to show benefits. And I think Randy talked about getting one day ahead or one step ahead on one thing. I think that would help. An example, the Selkirk Cabinet Yaks, there seems to be less conflict in the Selkirks, but as you move east, conflicts increase. And as you move west across the state of Washington, you're even going to get less. So I think if we're deliberate about what we take on, whether it's a current issue or not, in any given geographic location, there'll be benefit from it. I like the idea of bringing representation from the subcommittees together and getting our heads around what can we do together to make us more efficient and maintain the energy that we have in our own subcommittees on very specific geographic specific issues, such as Randy was talking about. It makes sense to me that we get together in one room or one virtual room and have that conversation.
I've seen Toby's had his hand up, but then Chuck wants to, I totally want to hear from you too, Chuck.
I guess from my perspective, the more we can do to lower and reduce or eliminate the administrative and political boundaries, it just makes sense. I mean, it's the way bears are acting. They don't know the lines, and whether it's the international border or the border between the Selkirks and the Cabinet Yaks, I mean, they don't recognize any of those, and I don't think we are doing them any favors by not necessarily using that as our cue to expand our view shed of how we deal with bears and hopefully, recover more populations and move to delisting.
Thanks. Chuck.
Yeah, so I have to second what everybody is saying. You're talking about the Bitterroot is what everybody's talking about. We've got bears coming in from the north, so it's an awareness thing. On the north end of the ecosystem, we've got sanitation problems up and down the Bitterroot. So, you've got that issue. And then, just increasing general, bear awareness of living with bears throughout the ecosystem, especially on the north and eastern sides of the Bitterroot ecosystem, is warranted and necessary. And I would be all for, especially not having the horsepower that was referenced earlier that some of the other ecosystems have. I would welcome having a little bit of that horsepower to help us out with just those efforts. So yeah, makes all the sense in the world to me.
Tricia.
So one more thing I would add that might be kind of helpful as we think through this. So we've kind of talked about, a concerted effort, and I'm kind of going back to what we did in Yellowstone ecosystem around campground infrastructure many years ago, where we were facing this daunting task of across all the national forests, we had all these campgrounds where we were having grizzly bear conflicts and without the appropriate infrastructure. And so then we had this great partnership with the Greater Yellowstone Coalition to actually put in bear boxes and holes across the ecosystem. But the thing that we did was we prioritized as a group across that whole ecosystem based on science, where's the best habitat, where's the most conflicts, and then we agreed to focus on those places first. And so I think there's another piece of this around, because it is pretty daunting to think about like all of these communities. And so I think bringing it's not just about getting to action, but it might also be getting to how might we put our heads around prioritizing our efforts collectively, and again, replicating things that can work across the whole ecosystem. And then I think for bears, we would be better off, and people. So just wanted to mention that, because we did also do that. And I know, again, you talk about bringing expertise. We have people who, did that work. I hate to put work on their plates, but again, maybe our energy is better spent instead of thinking about community and site conflicts at the Yellowstone scale, thinking about it at an ecosystem scale and putting the energy there.
Yeah, and that's a reframing of the question that Chairman Hogan's letter sort of asked last March. So you've got the subcommittees, and we're going to bring this agenda item to a close here. The subcommittees with substantive plans that they're doing really good work on. And I think one outcome of this discussion is that they're going to be having meetings in the fall, most whether virtual or however those are going to occur. Get those prepared to get into the work plan, so you can see the site-specific activity in the ecosystems with the bear management specialists. And then you separately have this question, and maybe it's the advisor group that takes it up, of what Tricia was asking. Is there some systematic look at what's needed across the region?
It looks like Matt, I want to back up when I introduced everyone and did roll call. I forgot somebody, and I think it's just because I'm mad at him that he's no longer here. So I just wrote him off, but Matt, you can introduce yourself.
That's all right. I've been in the background watching TV here, as you can see behind me. Not really, that's my daughter. So Matt Hogan, Deputy Regional Director for the Fish and Wildlife Service out of Denver. And you also forgot my esteemed colleague, Jim Unsworth, who the two of us were talking offline about maybe that was a subtle message. We should go fishing, but we stayed on regardless. But to that last point David made, Martha, if you're willing to accept a motion here, it seems like a lot of great discussion. It seems like kicking it to the advisors to maybe bring it up into, put it a little bit more in a package with a nice bow for us next time we get together. So we've really kind of thought this through because there's been a lot of really super comments here. So if you're willing to entertain a motion, I would move that we kick this to the advisors to take all this into advisement. I see Hillary smiling, thinking, okay, so there's not work group fatigue, there's going to be advisor fatigue. But kick it to the advisors to bring us back a more formalized approach to how to integrate the work of all the different subcommittees and the good work they've already done.
Thanks, Matt. I'd certainly entertain that. And I see that perked up Frank too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put a nice bow on it, Matt.
He loves it when I give him work, particularly because he doesn't even work for us, so.
No, I support that idea. I think that's a good idea.
So would we have a second for that motion?
Idaho would second it.
Any comment before we vote? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? None. Great. There you go. Be careful what you ask for, and you may receive more good work. But this is exciting. I think it's the way we are moving.
Okay, so Martha, I'll just check with you. We're scheduled to take a 10-minute break that would have ended at 11:50. Do you want to make that a little shorter, or how do you want to?
Let's still do a break and just do it a little shorter.
Okay, let's start again at 5 till the hour, if we could.
And David and Martha, I just want to point out, we do have 2 people who called in and they are raising their hands. So I don't know if that means they wanted to comment on this specifically, if there's room or time for that, or if we should just wait till the next comment period.
I think, Dylan, the idea, well, we'll look at Martha.
Well, we were trying to move toward having comment on each topic. It may not have been specifically on the agenda, David, but I encourage input when we can get it. So I'd hate to cut it off. What are your thoughts, David?
Go ahead then. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, and we inspired a third hand up. So we've got 3 hands up. So I will call on you in order, starting with a number starting in 406 and ending in 835. I'm going to unmute you. Please state your name and where you're from.
Yes, if you can hear me.
Yep, loud and clear.
My name is Mike Bader in Missoula, Montana. And my comment and question is, I'd like to see more discussion about conflict management and reduction in the 2 demographic connectivity areas that have been established under the conservation strategy, the Salish and the 9 Mile. And there's a lot of extractive development being planned in the 9 Mile, the Soldier Butler timber sale, and now the Familius Dorados gold mine. And the road density up there is just off the charts. And so shooting related illegal mortality is a real concern. I think right now the road density that's there it won't support the function that DCA has been designated for. So, I'd like to hear some ideas about how you're going to help that area actually function, because I think just drawing lines on a map doesn't cut it. We need to have conditions that'll support female grizzly bears, and so right now those conditions aren't very good. So I'd like to see the committee be given more attention to these DCAs. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for the comment, Mike. Next phone number starts in 307 and ends in 158. So I'm going to unmute you. Please state your name and where you're from.
Oh, sorry, Dylan. That was me for the vote.
Oh, all right. Hey, sorry, Tim. Didn't recognize that was you. Sorry. Well, the next number is a 307 number as well. And it's 307 ending in 633.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Well, still good morning, members of the IGBC committee. I'm Chris Colligan, the Wildlife Program Coordinator for Greater Yellowstone Coalition. I'm based out of Jackson, Wyoming. I just wanted to say that this is a really timely and encouraging conversation that you are all having, and support the action that you've taken. Over the past decade, GYC have refined our work to focus on what we've called the 3 C's: conflict reduction, core habitat protection, and connectivity. And also, I think what we've learned through this is that there's a need for a 4th C, and that's coordination, especially as bears are expanding between these ecosystems. And this is where the IGBC committee and subcommittees are absolutely critical to continued success on grizzly bear recovery. I wanted to encourage that we will continue to commit to this conversation, and we hope that you all will as well commit to coordination, and want to thank you for your efforts on conflict reduction that Tricia in particular previewed. We'll look for opportunities to partner with the appropriate agencies as we have on the campground partnership. And we wanted to encourage you to include, if you can, NGOs early in these efforts and conversations, because we have opportunities to bring resources to the table that may not be available to state and federal agencies. Lastly, I just want to thank you for your work and the opportunity to comment remotely, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you all in person in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. So it doesn't look like we've got anybody else there, David, so I'll hand it back to you. Thanks for squeezing that in.
Great, no, that's terrific. Thank you. So let's take the break then and start back at the top of the hour. So noon Mountain Time, 11 a.m. Pacific. We'll be back on the line to talk information, education, outreach. Thanks. Okay, folks, it's the top of the hour. Gonna reconvene us if I can. See a lot of, hard to know when folks are back in this virtual setting. But we're gonna press on because time is short. So I wanted folks to recall in June, so a month ago, we had 2 presentations on IEO. One from Danielle Euler, who gave us the overview of the Information Education Outreach Summit that was held in Helena in January pre-COVID, where they had more than 100 people together with all of their different BEAR programs. 40 different organizations were represented in that. And there was a pretty extensive report from that group about sharing messages and some recommendations on next steps. And then we also had a presentation from Lori Roberts, who's the chair of our Information Education Outreach Committee at IGBC, with some significant innovations and ideas coming out of that subcommittee in response to the direction that you've been giving them. And just a reminder, so let me share my screen really quick. In the briefing, the materials for this meeting online on the IGBC website are some proposals that Lori's going to be looking for decisions today. And these are the things that she discussed in June. So that includes reviewing and updating the funding criteria for the IGBC IEO grants to include prevention activities, approving some bear safety messages that are also on that website. Let's see, here's the, let's see, do I have it? The criteria is on the website for you to look at in the public. And the messages are also posted there on the IGBC website. And so for our purposes here, it's those 3 things that Lori has proposed, and being able to look ahead in recognizing what we noticed there in the conflict discussion, that in the subcommittees where we have the BEAR specialists, IEO is a tool in the toolbox, and one where we're fortunate to have experts that are thinking about things like what are the right audiences, what are the right ways to message to those audiences, and how can we make sure that we're using the resources that we have most effectively there. So I guess that's a quick recap. And maybe Lori, is there anything else you'd like to say to start this off?
Yeah, I would just like to say that a lot of this work is not just looking ecosystem based. It is those areas in between that we've been talking. So I feel like these 3 things we've come up with would definitely be good progress forward, and then we could continue to build on a lot of this. So if people have any questions about anything, I'm here to answer.
So Martha, this is where I turn to you or to Matt Hogan. If there's decisions on the table, how do you want to step through that, that process as a group?
Thanks, David. I would suggest we just go through each one by one. So, taking up the funding criteria first, and sorry, I had just turned away. I'm taking up the funding criteria first to recap. I guess let's have a discussion. Is there anybody concerned about discussion a little bit before we get a motion? Is there anyone concerned about the proposal to switch or include other projects in the funding criteria? I think it's a really great idea. I'm really glad to see it, but I'm curious if anyone is concerned about it. No. Well, so the process, David, I would think is if we are all in favor of this, somebody, we actually have a motion and vote on it. Is anybody inclined? Looks like you might be Jackie.
I'm good having a motion to move forward. So I would make a motion to move forward as proposed.
So to adopt the new criteria for the IEO grant funding.
Yes.
Do we
I'll
have a
second
second?
that motion, Martha. Oh, I'll second it.
Great. Great. Thanks. Any further discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Well, great. Thank you, Lori. Thank you for subcommittee. That's super work, and thanks everyone for being so efficient. David, I don't know whether you expected this to be so efficient. So one down, let's do the others.
No, that's great. So Lori, we'll make sure that that gets communicated out to folks who might be writing grants, to know that that's now in the scope for your cycle. So moving on, Lori, maybe you can give some background on the process, who was included, or sort of maybe where the idea came from that putting some messages together under IGBC was needed, and then what was the process and who was included and how you came up with this text.
Yep. So the messages were first started up by the Montana Southwest Bear Education Working Group. And I was a part of that group, one, because my position in the NCDE research team, Grizzly Bear team, trend monitoring team, but then also I was the IEO co-chair at the time. And so it was a group of conflict specialist and our IEO, so Daniel Euler and Lori Wolf, who works at Montana Wild, and then some of our IEO chairs, so Dylan, and education officers, Vivica for Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. So we wanted to come up with this messaging just to help Montana have an overall consistency with their bear messages. And we were trying to also put in specific groups that we felt just to make sure that the messages for those specific groups was also being put together. So hunters was a big one, we felt like, and this kind of goes along with the conflict and mortality work that Hillary and all of us have been doing in the different ecosystems. So we came up with these specific groups and exactly how did we want to message those specific groups. And when the summit happened, that also became very apparent that messaging and consistent messaging was very important to everybody. And so the people that were a part of that working group, we brought up our universal messages that we came up with and said, hey, we've done a lot of this work. And if people want to look it over, if they feel like these are good messages, if they want to add to them, they can. And so then it was, and in that summit, it got brought up that could IGBC house these messages? So we asked Danielle to kind of go through them and make them more, not so Montana specific, but across ecosystem specific. And that is where this document came up with. So she shared it with our IEO subcommittee and we went through and reviewed it. And this is what you have in front of you. And we've already used it once on the hunting ad that we took out and it worked beautifully, so.
A quick question with that, Lori. It looked also like one of the reasons for doing this was the ability to share it more and for more to have access to it.
Yeah, and that's why we are encouraging IGBC to hopefully put it on the website so that anyone can have access, not just agencies, but also nonprofits. If they want to come up with if they're trying to message a certain user group, this is a good brochure to start them off with some ideas. Thanks for putting that up.
Looks like Toby, your screen lit up. Toby and Hillary. That's how I know someone might want to speak, right?
Wow. No, I'm good.
Well, I love the concept of more people having access to it, and having consistency. I think we have Danielle is dialed in. Isn't that was a big topic that came up during that summit?
Mm-hmm. And I will say that it's also been really helpful with the Bitterroot group. So the Bitterroot group has asked me to sit in on their communication plan and their IEO, their smaller subcommittee that they have. And this was a big help for them, seeing that this document was already produced and that they could use it to see how they could message the different groups that they are looking to message in the Bitterroot. So people are already kind of excited about it and using it.
Hannah.
I really like the idea of consistent messaging, and we love to be using this on our website as well and sharing these messages. I wonder if the group had any conversation about sort of the change in our world. And one of the, the recommendations or the messages: travel in a group, stay close together. That's and with our COVID world, and with also in our COVID world, and people are using the outdoors perhaps more than they were, perhaps. So how, did you have any discussion about how to sort of marry those things?
Yeah, that's a good thought. And actually we have not, because unfortunately bear safety doesn't work well with the COVID world. I guess you could say travel in a group, but also 6 feet apart, try to do good social distancing. To tell you the truth, we have not. We did this all before COVID and just kind of edited the document when we were in lockdown before social distancing concepts and things like that. So if you feel like we need to adjust it to bring in this new world or add that, part to it, we could. But that's a good point. Matt had his hand.
So Martha, if you would, it's related, but a little bit tangential. We've had 2 employees in the last 3 field seasons, 2 years, have encounters with grizzly bears, one specifically doing grizzly bear research. You may remember that Hillary updated you on, and then we had another employee here not too long ago doing a sage grouse survey who had a grizzly bear encounter. And we've been looking pretty closely at our own protocols about having employees work singularly in grizzly bear country. I certainly don't. I wonder if there's some benefit for the IGBC to give some conversation or have some conversation around that issue globally, because I think we all have different protocols in terms of how we have people work in grizzly country, whether they're specifically doing grizzly work or doing other wildlife work in grizzly country. Because sometimes, frankly, we put our employees in situations that are inconsistent with what we tell the public. And it's on the top of my mind because we've been looking at our own protocols after we changed them after the last incident, and now we're looking at them again to maybe tighten them down even further. Thankfully, in both instances, our employees were not seriously hurt, but a lot of that was luck as much as anything, frankly. And so just something to think about maybe for a future conversation. Again, the IGBC can't, I'm not suggesting the IGBC dictate to agencies how they do it, but I think maybe using the IGBC as a sharing of best practices might be helpful.
That's a great idea, Matt. And I wonder whether, for the upcoming meeting, whether we even have a compilation or discussion of what each agency does require, doesn't require. Yeah, I'd be fascinated. I'd like to know.
And then, yeah, we could add agency or just personnel working in bear country, because it's not going to be just agencies, but there are also, forestry businesses that are out there. So that is a good point. We could put people working in bear country on this messaging list and add that. If after a discussion, I feel like that would be a great point.
And add the COVID piece too, potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not meant to be static, is it?
No. I think it would be a very good working document to revisit. And especially if we also revisit the summit, you know, people may come up with different ways of messaging and it could get added to this. So.
Well, does anyone see any downsides to doing this? Right. Then another way of putting that, does the executive committee approve of IGBC adopting these messages, these air safety messages, and posting them on the website? And that's not a motion. I think I'm asking if anyone likes the idea enough to present a motion. Crickets.
Geez, it's harder to get emotion out of people over the video than it is in person, Martha. I feel for you. So I'll move that we post the new bear safety messages on the website that were developed by the IEO committee.
I will second that.
Second.
Motion. I will second that motion.
You beat me to it.
Oh, Eric, sorry. I was
think
not
we
going to
have a
let
third and a
Matt hang
fourth.
here.
You know, the old teacher in me, it's like, this is the way I can tell if anyone's paying attention or not. It's nice to pop on. Oh, they're there. Okay, so we have a second. All those in, or any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Great. Well, that's a good step forward. And hi, Jim. I didn't mean to count you out. All right, David.
So the third of these sort of innovative topics from the IEO subcommittee is a concept of, again, clearinghouse of information, IGBC and its websites and its reach sort of range wide, putting together a webinar. So Lori, I don't know if you want to maybe give some of the topics that you might, this is, sort of partly instigated by the fact that we're in virtual world now. We're realizing that it actually is fairly easy and straightforward to put this content out there. And because you've got reach to lots of experts, what kind of things would be on that list?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just it. We've heard multiple times that we have such a plethora of expertise and knowledge and different topics that this idea of webinars. So I just put out, a big one, electric fencing. And I think that we could ask our partners, Defenders of Wildlife, because they do a ton of electric fencing. And then I threw in my co-chair, Kim, which I'm sure she's pounding me right now, but just because she wrote the brochure for FWP on electric fencing. I think that would be a good webinar topic, giving people insight to that. Any new grizzly bear research. And so the grizzly bear study team out of Yellowstone, the NCD team, the Canadians are doing a lot of good research on bears. And then any master's or PhD student that is working on bears could give a talk. And then the importance of bear spray, because that has come up with hunters and with recreationists and with bikers. And so we could have some of our bear conflict specialists talk about bear spray. And then what we've heard in our smaller IEO groups is those real accounts that someone using bear spray and how it worked. And even someone, carrying a gun and carrying bear spray, and they went to the bear spray first, I think is important. And then different agency topics. If the Forest Service would like to talk about any projects that they're doing, they could recap any new forest plan revisions that's happening. The Fish and Wildlife Service could talk about anything that's happening with their agency. So those were just kind of some quick topics I came up with, but I'm sure we could come up with a lot more, especially this community outreach ideas and conflict conflict site prevention, waste management, and the different tools we have there and the different expertise.
Thanks for the recap, Lori. And just for the folks here, so it would be IEO subcommittee that would handle the programming. And then
Yeah, I was thinking we would just do monthly right now, just so it's not overwhelming, and we would, you know, come up with a calendar, of course, and have it in advance. They're just, most of the webinars I've attended are an hour long, and you have the person giving the presentation there, and then you also have a facilitator. So like what Dylan's doing with this meeting right now, you would have someone facilitating the meeting, because people would be able to call in or write in comments to ask the presenter.
I see, Lori, that the proposal would add an additional cost to the WMI work plan. Can you clarify how that would work?
Yeah, we do. There would be an additional cost. Sorry, I'm just getting to my notes here. It would be about $20 a month per host. So if we just have one host, it would be around $240 a year. We could add that to the WMI work plan. We do have some room in that budget to add that cost.
Right. Is there a way to measure the efficiency? I mean, you know, to consider, or would you consider along the way how many people are joining them?
I think that's how we would approach the effectiveness of it, because the webinar that I attended with the Park Service, you had to register. And so not only can you see where people are attending it from, so are we reaching a broader audience than just kind of where we have bears? Are we getting interest from outside groups? And then how much interest do we have where bears are? And you know, this could just be a trial of, you know, let's try it for 6 months, or, you know, until our next summer meeting, a whole year, and then we could report back on the attendance and the participation and how much interest we got out of it.
Thoughts from anybody on this idea? Hannah.
I was just wondering what the target, you know, a greater audience, or what the target audience is. I mean, is it the sort of the practitioners, or more the communities and the people living in and amongst bears? Or did you sort of think that?
Yeah, I would hope it's the communities and the people living amongst bears, so that it's a way for us to get that more education out there. But I hope anyone would attend, but I think we're just trying to figure out, because a lot of people weren't able to do their bear fairs or their bear working, you know, their education groups. And so is this another way for them to do those? And even school groups, you know, and we can try to do a school group education one and really market it to different school groups around the ecosystem. So yeah, I think we were just hoping if this was a new way of our COVID world to reach out to people in bears and bear messages.
So this is Melanie. I'm sorry, I'm cutting in and out with my coverage, but did you say that it would not require additional funds to WMI? It could be within their existing fund?
Yep, it would be within the existing money that we already have. We are potentially saving a lot of money not printing brochures. And so we would be able to move the money that they already have, funds that are already there.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, this is Karen with the Park Service. Sure sounds like a great idea. I know we use webinars a lot out in the West, and we just did one for Wolverines, and it was really popular. And people got rave reviews, so I'm all for it.
Thanks, Karen. Trisha?
Yeah, I am all for this too. And I think for me, it's a way that we can probably do a better job of connecting with the people who don't live in our communities, because when we do these local, I mean, I'm all supportive of us doing the local, going to the fairs and reaching out that way, but we're only getting a certain number of visitors. And I don't know if this is going on across the ecosystem, but I can tell you in our part of the world around the Yellowstone ecosystem, what we're seeing this year, and whether this is a trend or whether it's just the COVID thing, is a lot of new time people visiting who have no idea about food storage, their awareness, and we're not able to keep up with it and reach out to them. And so I'm thinking that this is a test drive, but how those audiences that could be broader, I think it's a great opportunity. So I really applaud it. And I like the mix of sort of the educational piece of what's research is going on, but then also sort of the bear safety messages and testimonials and all of those. It's a great idea.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. We can do it very strategically. Like in the spring, we start talking to people about bird feeder, site conflicts, and then if you're traveling out west or something like that too, and then we can really try to target bear spray and hunters and different recreationists. So that is a good point.
Eric?
So this is Eric. Yeah, I'll just pitch in and I'll be brief because I'm really just gonna double down on what folks have already said. I think the only other thing that I would add is that I've been a part of so many conversations where we discuss the challenges that we have telling our story or communicating. And as Lori sort of pointed out, in a COVID environment, we're learning how effective we can be virtually. And so I think this is a really great idea.
Thanks, Eric. Chuck?
Fumble fingers. Sorry about that. No, I entirely support what Lori's got proposed here. I know we've had a lot of discussions here lately in regards to forest plan revision, how we can re-engage with the public and be effective. One of the challenges, and probably stating the obvious, is in a lot of our rural areas, internet connectivity sucks. And so that is going to be a challenge in regards to the virtual environment. So we just need to recognize that and try to think of some ideas, how we can work with that. But no, I think it's a great idea. So thanks.
Great. So I'd entertain a motion.
Hey, Martha, before that, I had a question for Lori. This won't affect the vote, but I'm just curious. So Lori, you're thinking this webinar would be a live thing, and then could we post it? Well, it would be live, and then would it be recorded and then posted on IGBC?
Yep.
Okay.
All the above. It would be just like this meeting. You do a Zoom webinar meeting and live to YouTube, and then it would be saved so that
Cool.
people could go back and review it.
Okay. The other thought I had, there's a number of podcasts, Right to Roam and Meat Eaters, and that are becoming more and more popular. I think they get a lot of listeners. I wonder, this is something maybe to look into. Could this be recorded also and then put on an IGBC podcast? I think that would be super cool.
Heck yeah. I think the ideas are endless here. So we're just trying to start small, see how much work and how much participation we get. But yes, I agree. But then we could have our own little IGBC podcast.
Cool.
I think you just volunteered Hillary to be the first person interviewed on the IGBC podcast. Toby's next.
I don't know about that.
Great. So rather than Matt saving me, somebody else want to save me?
I will. I will suggest that we accept the motion.
I second that. This is Karen.
Great. Thanks, Karen. So voting on the motion to move forward with these webinars. All those in favor say aye.
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 Great. Anyone opposed? All right. Thank you for that. And thanks for, I know it's taken a lot of thought, work, time to get that before us, Lori. So exciting to move all three of those forward.
Yeah,
I think that
I appreciate that. That helps a lot.
Yeah. So back to you, David.
Sure. Well, so we're right on time here with the agenda. Martha, is there any sort of concluding thoughts on those two pieces, having seen them come together before we go to comment? And then the group will come together after the public comment to come up with some of the logistics and agenda items for the winter meeting.
Thanks. I'm just excited to see how these are coming together and that we are focusing on that substantive work of information, education, outreach that's cutting across all of the ecosystem. I mean, all of the recovery areas. And so I'm just happy to see that we are all, I think, learning that the key is, I know there were the 4 C's or the 3 C's, but the key really is talking about conflict prevention. There's that piece of mortality in there, and then information, education, outreach. So I'm really happy to see the IGBC moving forward with each of those pieces. And frankly, that you raised, Toby, but seeing us start to talk about the whole ecosystem and not just the recovery areas that we're talking about everywhere. So hopefully that pulls us all in and keeps everyone really engaged. So I'm happy to see everyone's engagement in the conversation too. So thanks for that.
Great. So Dylan, I don't know if there's folks in the queue for this 12:30 opportunity for public comment. I've just shared the screen that has the phone number. And I know there's a bit of a lag for folks that are watching on the YouTube channel. So why don't we, let me see, Dylan, if there's folks that are ready. But the invitation here, the thought is, for folks who've been listening, reaction to this discussion today, and then any ideas that the committee should be considering as they plan their work for the remainder of this year, and then to come together for the business meeting in December coming up. So Dylan.
Thanks, David. Yeah, we have a few folks in the queue already who've called in. So if you are in there and you'd like to comment, please press *9, and that will raise your hand so that I know to unmute you and that you'd like to comment. For others out there, please dial in right now as soon as you can to get into that queue to provide comment. I'll give you some time to do that because I received an email comment from Trina Jo Bradley in Valier, Montana. She is in a noisy place, so she thought it would be better for me to just read her comments. So these are comments from Trina Jo Bradley, Rocky Mountain Front rancher and member of the Montana Grizzly Bear Advisory Council. First, I'd like to say I'm in full support of Secretary Barnhart's decision to not put grizzlies in the North Cascades at this time. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and state agencies are struggling to manage grizzly bears and the conflicts that they bring in the areas that grizzlies occur right now. And I don't think they need the extra headache of trying to establish a new population, especially in Washington, where people have zero experience with grizzly bears. Second, as I listen to your conversations about how to utilize your existing resources and the idea of putting together a working group made up of representatives from each ecosystem, I just want to encourage you to invite civilians from those ecosystems, especially ag producers, town councils, county commissioners, etc., to join that working group. If that isn't possible, I would suggest that you at least communicate with those people as you make plans. We are the ones that have to live and work in these areas, and many of us have just as much or more experience with grizzly bears as those people on your committee. Third, and relatable to my second comment, I want you all to keep in mind that there have been several outreach efforts in areas where bears are not yet established, but are clearly on their way, especially by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Wesley Sarmento. Sadly, those efforts have been met with a not my problem attitude, and the meetings he has set up have been poorly attended. How are you going to make these efforts more effective and actually get your message out to people without wasting precious time and resources in these landscapes in between, quote unquote? I would also encourage all of you to check out the latest draft of the Grizzly Bear Advisory Council's recommendations and guidelines. So that comment was from Trina Jo Bradley in Valier, Montana. And it is worth noting, like Trina mentioned at the end there, that just this morning we posted the latest draft recommendations from Montana's Governor's Grizzly Bear Advisory Council. Those are on our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks website. You can go to the homepage and find the link to that page, or it's fwp.mt.gov/GBAC. And the latest recommendations from that council are up for review, and we're going to take a couple weeks and accept more public input on that process. And then the council is going to kind of review that input and meet one last time before finalizing those recommendations. So I encourage you to check those out if you're interested. I'm kind of trying to just buy some extra time here to give more folks a chance who'd like to comment. I don't see any hands raised in the queue. So if you're in there and you'd like to comment, please press *9 so that I know that you would like to be unmuted. So there are 4 folks sitting in there. If you'd like to comment, press *9. Going once. Not seeing any, David, so I might hand it back to you.
May I jump in, Dylan, before handing it back and just reinforce huge thanks to the Grizzly Bear Advisory Council, the Montana Governor's Grizzly Bear Advisory Council. They just spent 2 days this week really having in-depth conversations that were just, I think, really encouraging to listen to. They built trust amongst themselves and are coming to, I think, some very helpful and actionable recommendations. So just a big thanks and shout out to that group, because I think their work will be helpful and is coming to many of the same conclusions we are. And that's, how do we focus on the work before us? And a lot of it's around information, education, outreach, about conflict prevention, about finding more resources to put toward this. So thanks to them.
Thanks, Martin. We do have somebody who raised their hand. So we do have a comment from someone out there. Phone number starting in 406 and ending in 673. I'm going to unmute you. Please state your name and where you're from.
Okay, my name is Claudia Narcisco, and I'm from Missoula, Montana. And I just wanted to say a couple of things. I really support the perspective of making this across region, not just within the recovery areas, all of your efforts as far as education and conflict reduction. The one thing that I have noticed in the past, or remember in the past, is that there was lack of, and this might be just kind of low-hanging fruit, and let me know if I am incorrect, but there is a lack of consistency even in some very basic things, such as food storage orders within the different national forests, for instance. And, I'm not faulting anyone, but it seems that if there could be consistency across the national forest, that would be helpful to the public so that they pretty much know the rules, one place to another place, and even interagency. And I realize that there are unique situations in each of the areas, and that could be supplemented on if there was like a baseline of useful food storage orders, across the region. And it could be done region-wide and even within Region 1 and 4, now that Idaho, the Clearwater and the Salmon Chalice are, although the Nez Perce Clearwater, I think, is in Region 1. Anyway, so that's one of my ideas. And that's not another thing that while I was listening to you early on, and I had to dart in and out, so I'm sorry I missed some of the later discussion when Lori was doing her presentation, because I'm sure it had a lot of good information on it as well. But from an organizational point of view, it would seem that if, when Hillary was talking about the different major causes of mortality by area, by the recovery area, that if the solutions and also the causes could be like lined up, because the solutions could be the same for those areas that have the same problems, or at least it could be a baseline again. And within each area, it could be expanded. So even if there was like a chart that, had, attractants, site situations. So if your solution could be applied commonly across as far and wide an area as possible, that would be helpful. And if there's unique situations in each area, that they could be, augmented. And, I have been paying a little bit of attention. I heard Trina Jo Bradley on to the recommendations from the Governor's Advisory Council. And, I haven't heard everything, and I'm going to definitely be reading the final recommendations, the final document. But, I hope that it reflects that people who are on that council came with an open heart and an open mind to solutions, and not to thwart creative and useful solutions. So that's what I will be looking for when I'm going to be reviewing my document and making my final comments. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. All right, David, I don't see any other hands up, so I will hand it off to you and Martha.
Thanks, Dylan, and thanks to everybody for providing the input and feedback. We really appreciate that. We'll definitely be looking at that, the work product that comes from that council. And Martha, I think you had a thought that might be something for the winter agenda. Either a presentation from the council itself, or somehow bringing that before this IGBC group.
Which council?
The Governor's Advisory Council.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. We didn't do it today, but because they're so close to finalizing their recommendations, but you bet, I think that would be great. I'll add that to my list of potential items.
Yeah, so that's where we are on the agenda here, is reflection, any summary or thoughts about what we have done today. We've got one action that I can recall from the conflict reports, which is that the subcommittees have produced, pursuant to the letter they received from the chair, very substantive plans. Yellowstone is in the process of revising theirs down further with very specific outcomes. Just as one example. So they'll continue that work in their subcommittees and be prepared in the winter to get some of that action into their work plans. That was one action from that discussion. And then another action from that discussion was just a recognition that it was useful in June. I think it was, what month was it? COVID is all running together. Yeah, it was in I think somewhere around April, May, we had the 3 subcommittees that had produced those plans meet with the IGBC advisors and just look at some of the commonalities. And so a thought is that maybe we continue that in a working group that the IGBC advisors are going to lead, and let the subcommittees keep doing their work and keep their focus, but engage them as needed in the most efficient way that they can come up with. Is that a reasonable capturing of that? I'm looking for anyone nodding. Okay. And then for the IEO topic, we had 3 specific proposals from the group, and all 3 were approved by this group. And so now there's lots of work to do here, but between now and the winter. So we know that the subcommittees, we know that COVID year is different. I guess I don't know what is likely to happen. It may be that subcommittees are having to do their meetings virtual this fall. It may or may not be the case that we're able to gather in Missoula, which would be the normal location for the winter business meeting. But we know we will be coming back together in some form. And so the question is, are there some agenda items to propose in addition to the actions that we just discussed?
Toby, I'll go after you.
Yes, David, I guess I would like to propose that we take some time at the December meeting to discuss sort of this bigger idea of treating bears as one ecosystem and not as several, and how we would go about that, and whether that's from a I think it could be related back to the work plans, the work plan for the IGBC, and I would also like to propose that we put together a small working group between now and our December annual winter meeting to sort of flesh out what this would look like and how it would fit into the IGBC and further move the ball down the field for getting bears recovered and delisted in the lower 48.
Okay, and membership, who would you need on that group, Toby? And can we identify some interest if there is?
Well, I think at a minimum, David, it would be someone from each of the the federal departments, Interior and Ag, and then a representative from each of the 4 states at a minimum. I don't want the group to get so big that it doesn't function well if we have a meeting or 2 between now and then, and I guess I'm open to whomever wants to be on those, but I think that would be the minimum membership, and trying to not actually get so big that we can't get anything done. I guess I would also welcome your recommendation on what you thought would work best.
I wonder, Toby, whether in choosing the members, you make sure also to have, they can be simultaneous, but for example, from Montana, I would might volunteer someone like Randy. I'd want to cover the different recovery areas. So I'd want to make sure that you have spread out on that committee, whether from the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, the states, make sure you've got covered the Cabinet Yaak, Selkirk, NCDE, GYE, etc. Because what would be helpful, I think, is to be thinking about the work plan, building this concept into the work plan. And since the work plans, because of wanting to build it into the work plans, I think it would be helpful to have someone from each of those recovery areas. Does that make sense?
And I would support some sort of spatial distribution of membership. Absolutely.
Great.
Anna from Washington, I'm supportive of this state participating, whether me or someone else. So I'd play.
Great. I don't know that we need to decide this now, Toby. I think we can also all get back to you on, who the specific person might be from the state. I think I'd like to talk to my own staff and decide who would be the most effective person on that, but would commit to having representation from Montana. I bet similar, I see you nodding, Hannah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we need to make that decision right now. Thank you, Martha.
Okay, so that's an interim action and it's an item for the December agenda. Anything else we should make sure is on track here?
I heard the concept of having some presentation about working in bear country. Discussion of what the different agencies do. And it would, as I heard Lori say, it may be a discussion of what the different agencies do, but we also are probably just talking about working in bear country generally.
And then I was wondering if we could add for the IEO, if we would like a presentation on the concept of the Bear Smart communities and having people on carnivores give a presentation that they wrote a letter that we presented to the committee in June. And so would we like a follow-up and a presentation on what that would entail? Would be a good IEO piece.
It's a good idea, I think.
Helps with that in between.
All I have to do now is just.
I know, yeah, there it is.
Okay, I wrote it down.
Okay, and if there's any other topics, I guess, Martha can help collect them. We have a fairly standing set of things that are done at this winter business meeting. Report outs from subcommittees, work plan development for the coming year. So I think you'll be busy. Any thoughts, Martha, at the moment in terms of your crystal ball of, are we going to be on Zoom again, or what do you think in December?
Thanks for asking me that, and I'll get to that question, David, but Chris, it looked like you had a thought too, and was that probably a follow-up on?
It would be a follow-up. I think the other key item that came out of the executive session that we still need to finalize is the FY21 budget and how much money we want to allocate for FY21 to WMI. We need to get that one resolved too.
Yep. Thank you.
Tim Woolley had his hand up, so I'm going to unmute him. Go ahead, Tim.
No, I was just going to say, I was like, Trish could even double up on that in working in bear country stuff that I think Wyoga's working on a video or a CD to be able to share that. So I think that would be a good agenda item for the meeting. So sorry, but I'm kind of delayed on that.
Thanks, Tim. Full agenda doesn't preclude other agenda items from coming up. To answer your question, David, I would be inclined to plan for a virtual meeting, and if somehow things hopefully change, we could pivot, I think, pretty quickly to planning a meeting in person in Missoula, right? Isn't that where we normally have the winter meeting, or it's easy to get in and out of, and we know certainly last time I loved where we stayed. It was a good place to meet, etc. Anyway, I hate to say, but I think we should plan for a virtual meeting, and if we get to meet in person, that's a bonus. Anyone's crystal ball look a little bit different than mine?
So maybe spread it over a couple different days.
Yeah, how did that format work for you to spread it out?
It seemed, I've been going to, well, just lately, like 3-day meetings in a row, 4 hours each day. And they're doable, especially if it's only 4 hours, but it has that continuity, closer in like that. I mean, so you can put it in 1 week and you don't lose track of the thought processes.
Mm-hmm. Jackie.
Yeah, if it's virtual, you got to break it up, but I like the continuity of if you could do it together, it's easier to track with the conversations. Although I'm still rooting for the in-person in December. That's my hope. But if we do have to do it virtual, then the breaking it up, but breaking it up within a closer time frame, I think is helpful.
Great. Isn't there a traditional week in December when we do it to just block out? How much time do you think we need? Do we need 3 half-day blocks?
Probably 3 half days.
To at least carve out that time?
I would agree. 3 half days would be a minimum.
Yeah, you might want to plan for the full 3 days. And
okay,
it seemed like we always covered the first half day and then had a full day and then another half. But then oftentimes that last day with half was only dwindled down to a couple hours that we can consolidate into 3 different sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we should plan for the 3 days anyway, in case we would have a in-person, and then we can carve out the half days out of those 3 for the virtual, because maybe we do a morning and an afternoon and a morning, or some mix of that.
Okay. And what week is it traditionally in December?
Towards the middle.
Yeah, I think we were doing the first week, but then I think the Forest Service had a regional thing, so we moved it to the second week.
Yeah, it was like that.
Yeah.
So the 7th, 8th, and 9th?
Something like that.
Well, why don't does the 7th, 8th, and 9th of December not work for anyone? What were you laughing, Jackie?
Oh, I just had a thought in my head. Sorry. I think I'm good though. I think that week works. They were talking about a date the other day. But I think if we get it scheduled now, I can hold it. So.
Martha, that's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't know if people have things on Monday.
Maybe, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Would be 8, 9, 10.
Oh dear. I just got a reminder, we have a management team meeting scheduled 7, 8, and 9. Well, we could do it 9, 10, 11. Half day 9, full day 10, half day 11.
Now, last year was 16, 17, 18.
How about 16, 17, 18? Does that work for everyone?
Or 15, 16, and 17. So you don't go up against that Friday, because lots of people are going to start taking their holidays. And I remember those comments last year. It was, so close to the holiday period and people taking use or lose and all that.
Well, what about to 9, 10, 11? Does that work better? Okay. Hannah?
9, 10, 11 is better.
Okay. Okay. Well, at the moment, let's carve out half day on the 9th, full day 10th, and hopefully half day on the 11th. Great. David, what am I missing?
I think that we've worked through this agenda. I really appreciate everyone's patience. I know these virtual meetings are tiring, but really appreciate the participation and engagement, and look forward to seeing what happens here over the rest of this year.
Thanks everyone for being so engaged and getting a lot done today. So lots of work between now and December. Let's keep it up, and I hope everyone stays well. I miss seeing you in person. Thanks for being on the screens, but everybody stay well, and hope you can continue to get your work done.
Great. Thanks for the good organization and discussion, everyone.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Setting this up. Appreciate it.
And David and Dylan, thanks a lot too for getting this together. You guys did awesome.
It's great.
I know, Dylan, you're getting awfully good at this.
I will say, any subcommittee that's doing a fall meeting that needs any support on that virtual, we've got support now in the agencies. We're figuring things out. So just let us know.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to help anybody get these going. the learning curve is steep, but you can quickly get there.
Okay, see you, everyone.
Bye, Jim.
Bye, guys.
Okay, I'm going to end the stream right now. Thank you, David and Martha. Nice job.